Hello. Today we are going to discuss about a very important topic. In fact, the important topic in relationship marketing, which is related to business marketing. A very important feature of relationship is that the buyers are developing single source suppliers because of the necessity of quality, reduced inventory, develop integrated delivery system, and efficient delivery to the markets. The ultimate goal in developing this capacity is to reduce cost. The cost reduction can happen by two opposite strategies. From the point of view of the buyers, these strategies are: number one, that they look for the cheapest supplier, or they look for the supplier who is going to fulfill their terms and conditions, the buyer's terms and conditions. So in this strategy, the buyer will pit the suppliers against each other so that it can achieve a competitive advantage over the competition across the sellers. This is good when you have got a large number of sellers and the sellers do not know each other, and thereby the sellers cannot create a cartel. Probably you know cartel is very dangerous for competitive business. So what happens here? The suppliers will compete among each other to get the order, and the buyer plays an important role in generating that competition across the suppliers. The second strategy is to achieve a cooperation between one seller and the buyer. It doesn't mean that buyer will deal only with one seller, but that one seller would be dealing with the buyer on a particular product. It may be goods or it may be services. So when you go for cooperative buying selling process, then it helps both the parties to lower cost by working together. Importantly, we must remember that they create an opportunity, that cooperation creates an opportunity to create a platform to work together. In the parameters, finally that might reduce cost. It might increase effectiveness in inventory management and reduce unnecessary tasks and procedures. For example, if a buyer deals with so many different suppliers for buying the same product, then a buyer will have to perform so many different tasks which would be repetitive in nature. If a large order is broken down into different sellers, what happens? You'll have to create purchase order, you'll have to take approval, then you'll have to pay the bills for each of the different suppliers, and ultimately what you get the same amount of products from all the buyers. The same amount of products, if that can be generated from the single supplier, that can reduce a lot of unnecessary tasks, provided the same amount of effectiveness, same amount of efficiency in qualitative terms, in quantitative terms, can be achieved through that cooperation between the single seller and the buyer. But then all suppliers may not be suitable for cooperative relationship. Probably that is what came to your mind by this time, that yes, it is not everybody's game, neither every buyer's game nor every supplier's game to work in a cooperative environment. The relationship the buyer will have to work on depends on two situations. The first parameter or a variable, the buyer will look forward to what is the amount of operating risk it will have if they forge an alliance or cooperation with that particular seller. And second, equally important variable is what kind of value addition the buyer's product will get after getting associated with that seller. This particular diagram, y-axis, the vertical axis, is defining the amount of operating risk for the buyer. Now, it is not possible always, I understand, to quantify risk for the buyer or risk for any other risk. Many of the risks are qualitative risks. Whether the seller is trustworthy, whether the seller will fulfill kind of a commitment they will give, whether the seller will give the buyer the right quality product, or will they maintain the delivery schedule. These are the risks associated with it. And finally, if the buyer is buying a raw material in order to produce a final product for a market, then these risks become manifold. And therefore, the buyer will have to very carefully assess that risk when they try to deal with a particular supplier. So as you can well gauge, that all suppliers may not really offer that kind of low risk for a buyer. So buyer would look for a supplier with lowest risk in terms of money, in terms of supply schedule, in terms of quality, in terms of if there is a problem, if there is a situation that is emerging without any indication or future planning that how this particular seller will react to the particular situation, and when all that particular seller would be able to mitigate the situation and help the buyer. That is number one. Number two, equally important, is that what kind of value addition the buyer product will get from association. If the seller has got a novel product, has got an innovative product, invented a new one, and nobody else is producing that, that means the buyer do not have any other choice but to buy from the seller, because if they get that product from the seller, the buyer can really get huge value addition for their final product, for their final market. But if it is a product which is already running in the market and there are suppliers, and these suppliers are already covering a market share in the competitive environment, and they already have got a brand image around, then that buyer would look forward to a partner whom probably will have a good market presence, will market image, and the ultimate customers of the buyer can recognize that particular brand. In such a situation, the buyer will think that yes, doing business with that particular supplier will be meaningful and really would make good business sense. For example, so let us talk about Swiggy at this moment. Swiggy and Zomato are coming up and taking a lot of market share and customers' imagination, creating a very good value to the market. They've generated a loyal group of customers across them, and then suppliers for Swiggy or partners of Swiggy are really turning up to them in order to achieve what otherwise would have been impossible. Now, in a small town or even in a big town, one restaurant is doing very good in the business. Those who go outside, dine outside, they know the name of the restaurant. And if Swiggy can have a partnership with that restaurant, because the restaurant is well known among the customers of Swiggy. The moment the customers see that restaurant is coming up, the restaurant's brand image is so good that the customers would find that, okay, there is no problem. They are consistently offering very good quality product, hygienic product. And then Swiggy would find it very easy to deal with that particular, and there will be win-win situation for both the Swiggy and the supplier, because the brand image of that restaurant is helping Swiggy in generating their own business. Same is not true when Swiggy is dealing with an unknown or little known restaurant. The moment Swiggy's app will prompt that particular restaurant, Swiggy needs to it is other way around, it is happening now. Swiggy needs to offer that assurance to the customers that this particular restaurant is as good as any other restaurant that is appearing in the app. That means the restaurant is getting benefited with partnership with Swiggy rather than Swiggy is getting benefited from partnership with that restaurant. So where Swiggy will go? Of course, Swiggy will go for a good, highly branded, highly recognized restaurant in that particular small town or a big town. So what does it mean? It means that from the buyer's perspective, buyers would always look for a supplier for long relationship, long cooperation, where the amount of risk is less and where value addition is the highest. So with this, let us do a little bit of marginally different relationship marketing ladder. In fact, it is known as a steps of relationship marketing. That is available, or that is seen in the market when businesses are being done between business to business. As you all know, prospects will go up to the tasters. Tasters here is the buyer would be aware about the seller, and buyer is exploring whether the seller is trustworthy, or what kind of product they are offering, what is the quality of the product, and look for word of mouth. So after awareness, interest is being generated and the prospect becomes a taster. Then when the buyer tries to buy a particular product, then they try to evaluate the proposition the seller is offering. Maybe they are asking for some kind of quotations. Maybe they are trying to use a product where you do not have to change your process that you are taking it, giving out a small order and trying to fit it and trying to test it into the already running process. Then you become a shopper. The buyer becomes a shopper. And when the shopper starts buying from the seller, it doesn't mean that they are yet buying from the same seller all the products necessary for the particular consignment. But then as a seller, you have acquired the business, but you are not yet fully trusted. What the buyer will do, buyer will keep the alternatives live. They will not ditch, or it will not ditch, the already active seller in favor of you. Here what happens, even if you make a small error, it might be fatal. So accounts here means is that you have started, kind of a steady business, but you are not beyond the risk as a seller. Buyer would always try to avoid you, try to ditch you, because you are not generating that kind of trust, that kind of cooperation, and that kind of exit barrier for the buyer. We'll talk about that exit barrier later. But then once you are tested, you have generated the trust, and they realize that yes, you are a brand or you are a supplier who is creating value or added value to the buyer. The buyer becomes patrons. So your account becomes longer term trusted account, right? So its partner is a little bit one step higher than a client's. Your values and your process is adopted by the buyer. You do R&D together, and your buyer's future are interlinked. So what you do, you will grow. Both of you will grow in mutual commitment. We'll deal with this a little later also. If not in this video, in a later video. And then finally, you generate advocates. That is, these buyers will have a high level of goodwill for you. Only major violation is capable of eroding the long-standing relationship between you and your buyer. You no longer need a deed, an agreement, a stamp from the court to be glued to each other. You understand each other properly. Buyer trusts you so much that they keep on advocating your products and throw very high level of very positive word of mouth across you. So they will stand up for you and tell others to buy. And also there is another thing, that they are good complainers. What is good complainer? Good complainer is those who complain for your betterment. Because complaint is always a boon for any business organization. So So a good complainer will always try to help you by pointing out the problems they faced or the problems they could foresee that the other buyers would also face because something is wrong with your service or with your goods. I often remember Bill Gates' famous quotation that a complaining customer is an asset for any organization. You should always remember that if somebody complains in a constructive way, in order to help you, they are your advocates. So there is a commitment between you as a seller and your buyer. So what happens here is that awareness has become interest, interest has become evaluation, evaluation would lead to trial, trial finally would lead to adoption. Of course, a satisfactory trial will lead to adoption, and then ultimately there will be commitment, and that commitment would be long-standing commitment, and then only we can say that yes, there is a relationship between the buyer and the seller, and both of them has become partners. But then the road is not so easy. Every step is slippery, specifically when you are generating accounts and you come in close quarter with your buyer. A buyer can find out anything and many things about your problem, about you, about your customer service, about your call center, about your commitments. Anything is possible for the buyer to understand and to evaluate. And when you come together, it happens to human relationship also. When two persons come together, only then the flaws would be magnified. So when a buyer would start buying from you steadily, the buyer would realize where you are faltering. And here it is very easy to lose the trust the buyer is looking forward to. So when you do that, then you come down to shoppers. It's like a game. Or maybe you go down to somewhere else, even they will not try again your product. So therefore, what happens is that only thing that you can do here is that communication. Communication is the key, because it's very, very difficult. Graphically, you have taken first step, second step, third step, and fourth step. But then you can go down to the gutter if you are not communicating very well to your customers. Many things will go wrong. As I said, your salespeople are not good. Their behavior is not good. Their body language is not good. The people who are replying calls, the buyer calls, in a bad mood. You are not treating them well. The telephone line was not there. The email was not working properly. Your email got lost. That person's email got lost somewhere. Many things can happen, and anything can really bring in doom for you. So therefore, you will have to take one step at a time. Be very, very careful, and it means that a process and end state are closely linked. You understand that a process, how people will buy. You must understand how your client is, your account is buying, and exactly how does it help you in creating that account and then making them into patrons. I hope that you could understand the basic concept here. We talked about how a buyer is evaluating a particular supplier. It should have minimum risk for the buyer, and the supplier should also offer highest level of value addition to the supplier's product. Before that, we understood the buyer plays a very important role in taking up two opposite strategies. First strategy was that he will go for competitive bidding and look for a competitive pricing and competitive terms and conditions, and that will lead to competition among the suppliers. Second thing is, which is a little bit more modern from my point of view, is that the buyers will try to create a long-standing relationship with a single supplier or a small number of suppliers for the same kind of products, and that will lead to relationship marketing. Once a buyer decides to buy from you as a seller, it's not so easy to come up to the relationship marketing later. So buyer remains as a prospect, and then it becomes a taster and become a shopper and an account and a patron, and finally it becomes an advocate. But then it's difficult to falter anywhere, any of the steps, and you can go down to the gutter if you're not very careful. So this is where we stop it at this moment. We'll take up the other part, that is the necessary conditions for starting B2B relationship marketing, in the next video, which is coming right away. Thank you for watching. Till then, take care.